Welcome back to Bigfoot Week here at WeAreChange. We have another mind-blowing interview for you today with guest Russell Accord, one of the hosts of Expedition Bigfoot. You'll be amazed at what he has to share. So joining me is Russell. He was selected to be on Expedition Bigfoot. It's a pleasure to have him on the show. How are you going there?
Great, thank you for having me.
You're more than welcome. So how did that all eventuate, being on the travel series?
Great, absolutely wonderful experience. I was picked out of, I imagine there were quite a few that were gone through. Why they picked me, maybe they needed an old guy with a military background, I'm not sure, but it was luck, that's for sure.
Yeah, very exciting. So, yeah, explain to the viewers a little bit about your background, please.
Been doing research since the early 70s. I started out in the Bitterroot Mountains of Montana, been all over Montana, then I migrated into Idaho, Washington, done quite a bit in California and Oregon, both back east in Ohio as well as Florida. When I was in the military, there were a lot of, I actually got to do a little bit of research overseas when I was in the military as well. It seems to be the legend that goes global. It seems to be everywhere. So it was fairly simple to do in other countries as well. It was great.
Very impressive, your military experience, and that gives you credibility for a subject like this, doesn't it?
So it's you kind of cut out the fear factor and you stop worrying about what's out in the wilderness. One of the earliest lessons learned from me before I got in the military is my dad would take me out in the wild, and we would identify sounds, that were around us in the wilderness.
Yeah.
And then he would take me to the exact same place in the dead of night, and the exact same sounds that we'd already identified. He said, if you heard that and didn't know what it was, that would be frightening, wouldn't it? But knowing what it was, the night no longer scared me. It was great.
Some people have claimed to hear a low guttural scream or a yelling, and they've attributed that to some type of great ape or beast. That's a common occurrence over there, isn't it?
You hear a lot of things in the forest that are unexplained. I've heard a lot of things, but I've never had a Class A experience. I've never actually had eyes on an actual walking, living, breathing Bigfoot. And with that, a lot of the things that I have heard in the wilderness, I've heard bear, I've heard mountain lions, I've heard everything you can imagine. And there's just a vast amount of sound ranges that you can get out of the forest. And I've heard things that I cannot identify, that's for sure.
Yeah, very mysterious. And with your tracking experience, how has technology helped in trying to locate this creature?
Well, if you've watched Expedition Bigfoot, you'll see that I've actually brought in some of the stuff that I really enjoy working with. Being in the military, I used the night vision goggles, the PVS 7s, that they're very, very good. You can just have that, everything looks green around you, and it's like walking in the daylight, only green. The other thing that I've added to my toolbox that I'm really happy with is the thermal imaging. You can only see so much through a PVS 7 or through night vision goggles through the green, but if you have a balance change in the air and the temperatures, and you see something glaring back at you that is putting out a tremendous heat temperature, you might not have been able to see that through the night vision goggles. So pairing the two has been really, really instrumental.
Very much so. It's groundbreaking research, and picking up a heat signature with the thermal imaging, that's a clear indication that there is something roaming around, and you can pick up the pattern, the whole body, and you can it comes into the picture, and that must be very exciting when you can see that on the screen.
There's been some things that it doesn't take long to identify a deer or an elk or a bear or that sort of thing, but when it's something that's like we found in the show that was just tremendous size, that put out a very, very hot thermal image, not being able to identify that by just its shape was really that was exciting. I haven't felt that kind of excitement in a long time. That was pretty cool.
That's excellent. Some people say it could be a descendant of the Gigantopithecus, another ape that was roaming around. It could be a similar lineage. Is that what you believe?
I haven't really put it in a box, so to speak, that it has to be this. I believe that it would be flesh and blood. That's one thing that I've kind of stood with, is the flesh and blood. But then there's always that other side of things that they say that they're interdimensional, or that they can move through time and space. And that's a little tougher for me to grasp that, but I won't discard it. I'm not going to say, well, that's hogwash, because my theory has not been proven yet either. So you don't know. I want to say that it's flesh and blood. It would be a descendant of human, descendant of an ape, or maybe something that mixed along the way years ago. We know for a fact that there were cavemen way back in the day. So maybe there's a lost tribe that we've yet to discover. I don't know. There's so many theories out there. It's kind of fun to kind of wrestle with all of them.
It certainly is. And Willow Creek, the famous place where Patterson and Gimlin shot the footage, that's become a big tourist attraction now. People flock there in droves, don't they? They want to get a piece of the action.
It looks so much different now than it did in 1967. You know how the growth and the trees that were little tiny saplings this tall you got to climb them. They're just big giant trees now. It's been quite some time. So what are we, 53 years now? 53 years. So there's a lot of growth in 53 years. So but it's been well taken care of by a group called the Bluff Creek Project. They keep the trail cleared. They can, if you get close, there are some of them that will actually walk you down to the site to show you, kind of give you the history and the layout and where, certain landmarks are. I took Bob Gimlin there last year.
Wow.
He hadn't been there in quite a few years. We walked him down the trail, let him stand there, and I actually got some pictures and did a little bit of film work, because I do film work. Did some film work of him actually walking the same trail that he and Roger had walked 53 years ago. And it was kind of neat to see him walk that path, and then he also walked the same path that Patty had walked so many years ago. So it was kind of a nostalgic, kind of a fun piece of history that I was able to get on film there. It was a blast.
That's incredible. And they say Roger Patterson, he might have been a bit down on his luck at the time when he captured that footage, but that doesn't negate the fact that it is one of the most incredible pieces of film that we've ever seen. You can see the muscles moving underneath the skin, and you can see the calf, the back shoulder blades. There's no way that they could have replicated that. They didn't have the Hollywood costumes and the technology to be able to pull that off back then. So it's very much one of the most important pieces of film the world has ever seen, isn't it?
Agree. But even now with the girls wearing leggings and tight spandex, that sort of thing, that was not in existence in 1967. And to have something that form-fitting that would stretch and move with the body just wasn't around. So you're right, seeing the flexing of the muscles and the even when the head turned, there was no movement or rippling of any kind of a costume, or even that was during the time when they were building the movie called The Planet of the Apes. And they had such a difficult time with the seams and the wrinkling of the skin and everything that they actually put you remember on the movie, they actually put a vest on them, and that, so they were able to conceal that sort of thing. So if your best Hollywood producers had so much money at their fingertips to build the latest and greatest and the best, couldn't even hide that, then you're right. The Patterson-Gimlin film was well ahead of its time, if that's what it was.
Yes. And there was a few imposters that stepped forward. They claimed to be the one wearing the costume, but when it came down to the crunch, they couldn't even pick the location. They didn't even know where it was filmed. So a lot of people try and jump in. They want to get some attention off this. A lot of people are seeking that out, aren't they?
I did 4 months ago. There's a guy who actually said that he was wearing the costume. His name is Bob Hieronymus, or Robert Hieronymus. I told him that I was doing a documentary. I told him that, look, I talk with Bob Gimlin all the time, and I'm doing a documentary, and I've listened to Bob talk. I said, but the best thing that I can do is you don't decide a court case without seeing and letting everybody talk from both sides. So he allowed me to come into his home, set up my camera, and I interviewed him for several hours. And his story was very interesting. And when I finally put that story out and put the whole film together, it will be one of those things that, like you and I or anybody else, you listen to both sides of it, you decide for yourself, and I'm not doing it to convince you of Bob Gimlin or Bob Hieronymus. I just want you to see what both individuals have to say and let the chips fall where they need to.
Very well said, and a great approach. Now, people have sent off fur and bits of hair to the laboratory, and they've done the DNA sequencing, and it's very close to human beings. That was an incredible discovery, wasn't it?
Even today, I get, last month I had 3 hair samples sent to me, 3 different hair samples. And if you have several in a group, if you have just a cluster of hair samples, the first thing I do is I peel one off and I light it on fire. And you know the smell of hair burning, or you can see it'll actually grab a flame and roll if it's nylon or man-made. It's a completely different smell. Out of those 3 samples, one of them was immediately discarded as man-made polyester or synthetic. So it was dismissed immediately. The second one was I looked at it through my microscope, and it's the same as a horse hair. It was just some of the smaller bits of horsehair. The third one is the interesting one, and we're still actually looking at that. I will only take it so far, and then because there's quite a few samples of this cluster, so I will only take it so far as I can go with it, and then I will send a portion of that to a lab. But that's quite expensive. But I've not been able to find anything on our database that matches it. So it's actually kind of exciting. And that was something from back east, back in Illinois, Ohio, Kentucky, back in that area there somewhere.
Well, that's exceptional. And people are always concerned about having the items confiscated or it going missing in the lab. They try and cover up a lot of evidence. They want to suppress the information from the public as well. That's very alarming. And
the samples that I have were given to me by someone he only gave me a portion of his sample. The sample that I have, I will only give a portion of that away. That way we have 2 stages backup if it happens to disappear, and you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So we protect that kind of evidence pretty tightly back here.
Yeah, and in the States, tens of thousands of sightings, and some of them, it's just amazing. And the footage as well, people have explained they've seen a big male and a couple of cubs crossing the road, and then they were able to flee really quickly in a way that a human, it wouldn't have been possible to get that much ground covered in that distance in such a short time. So, you know, it's unlike anything they've ever seen. Many accounts from credible people, sightings, a lot of families as well. They're having lunch, picnics,